All right, mystery drum set number 2. There's a 5-piece kit here. I'm going to play it 3 times. You'll see why at the end. All right, 3 times. Nothing special. Just want the drums to do their thing, okay? So listen carefully. See what you hear. Listen critically. You know, headphones, the whole gig. Earbuds, whatever you wear. And listen critically see if there's any dramatic differences in the drums that are here. Okay? I know you will hear some, but beyond that, I don't think you're going to hear much at all. See what you think. Number 1. Number 2. Number 3. Okay, what are you looking at here? Back in the very first video, and then in the bearing edge videos, you saw these three drums. The first setup you heard, birch, maple, mahogany. And then I just went clockwise. So it became mahogany, birch, maple. And now we're maple, mahogany, birch. Same heads, single ply, clear. Free floating design. This time I just went a little fancier with the hoops. Put some dye on them. And I sprayed the rods bronze. And all I did was retune these drums for each setup as I went around. Raised it, lowered, lowered. Raised it, lowered, lowered. Raised it, lowered, lowered. So I got my three pitches. Now, where are we here? This is the maple. I heard a little bit of a squeak in this tom, and I saw later it's because when I put it back in the stand, I put the tuning points right where the arms of the basket are. Not good. Not good. That should have been distanced like so. But anyway, it wasn't that bad. So, as I played the drums, the snare drum. The snare drum, many years ago, I bought a Griffin snare drum, bought the whole drum off Amazon, and Griffin is a place down here in Tyler, Texas, I think, and they sell very inexpensive hardware, drums. Some of the hardware is actually pretty good, and some of it is, beginner level. But I have a remote hi-hat stand that's really pretty beefy. I'm surprised when I got it. A good buy for the money, for sure. Anyway, so this drum, I don't know what the wood is. I don't know. Poplar, maybe. Alder, basswood, I have no idea. And it had a wrap on it, some kind of a wood finish, faux wood finish wrap. Took that off, and I wanted the shell. So I bought the whole drum because to buy a Keller shell of this size costs more than what the entire drum did. Well, what is this drum? This is that 6 by 10, like these are all 10-inch toms, right? 6 by 10, and do you see the finish on it? Well, that's the 14-inch roof flashing shell. I cut that up and I covered this with the galvanized roof flashing inside and out. I did not have a snare head for it, so I just sanded this down. It's just a tom head, sanded it down to thin it out, and it worked out pretty good. Single, just a pick strainer, no big deal. That might even be the original strainer that came with the drum. The bass drum. If you remember the $10 tom in the second video, I may have showed it again, I don't forget. It had a dark blue wrap on it, 4 lugs. I took that shell, covered it in oak inside and out, and that shell as well, I have no idea what it is, maybe poplar, more than likely basswood, very light, so I added the oak veneer to it and squeezed it, sandwiched the shell with the same idea here, free floating, but you can see the frame is set up to stay in place. It's not just a couple of hoops, it's a hoop frame kind of setup with a couple of really old spur brackets and a couple of steel rods coming out, keeps it in place. And it's the same thing. It's got two single-ply clear heads. It had a real boing to it, and I tried using the hydraulic head, and it was squeezed like that. It was just dead, totally dead. Probably shouldn't do that. The microphone's probably going crazy. Sorry. Anyway, so I just used some of this frosted glass spray that you get at Walmart in the spray paint section, and I sprayed the heads just to deaden them up a little bit, and looks okay and works good. Bass drum patch down there. So that's the bass drum. Now, it's not a bass drum. Obviously, that would have been the drum that you said something is wrong there. But I wanted to keep it all 10-inch drums to see what would you hear. I know you did not hear any significant differences between these three shells. I know it. I'm sitting here. I've been playing this thing all morning. And you can see I'm set up saying, Ray, what are we looking at? You're looking at part of my living room, and the kitchen is behind you. It's an open floor plan in this house, and I need to finish this up before my wife gets home and says, why is there a drum set in the kitchen? What are you doing? But I wasn't going to take down my big set just to put this up. So I just set something up in here. Easy as I could. I know you did not hear any significant differences between the maple and the birch and this mahogany, which is actually poplar with very thin, where is it? Oh, it's here now? No, this is it. That's the mahogany. Poplar core, very thin, paper thin layer of mahogany inside and out. I wouldn't call that a mahogany shell. Keller calls it a mahogany shell. I got these from Anderson International when they were still selling drum shells. All right. So all I did was change the pitch. And that's how you know all this hype about shells and what you're supposed to get. All you heard was a da da dun 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 dun. The bass drum, yeah, wonky. And I could have put a 16-inch, like a 6 by 16-inch tom shell in that type of frame. And looking at gig kits that are out there with 16-inch floor toms for bass drums, I'd get a pretty good thump. And you wouldn't have noticed. I know you noticed this. That's not the point. It was just for the kick accent, all right? I'll call it a kick. I wouldn't call it a bass drum. There's no bass about this 10-inch tom whatsoever. Now, in playing the set, even the snare drum being 10-inch, and this on the last mystery set, I also used a 10-inch snare drum with all the other 10-inch toms that were shown in that second video. And people commented, wow, I can't believe the snare drum is a 10-inch. You see, it's how the heads are tensioned, the pitch. This is not as tight as I normally like a snare drum head, but I lowered it so the pitch sounded more traditional sounding, not high-end crack. Just lowered it a little bit. Now, I know I didn't play the same thing all three times. I tried to stay somewhere in there. I forgot. By the time I started the second one, got up, moved around, dealt with the camera, did this, I forgot what I played the first time around. Right, so I went back and I watched it back. I said, okay, I'll remember bum, 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 bum. At least I'll get that stuff right, sort of. By the time I got to the third one, I don't know what I'm doing. But what I do know what I'm doing is showing you that all the super hype manufacturers make about wood, specie, plywood drum shells is not real world truth. It's not. I mean, look, somebody says you have to mic each drum to hear differences. Well, do you put your ear up to your drums when you play them? No. I'm 2 to 3 feet away from everything here. Right? 30 inches away from me. Nobody does this. You hear a sound field, and everybody else hears a sound field, a sound stage that a drum set throws off. I hit the snare drum and the cymbals start ringing. I hit the floor tom, and you can hear the cymbals going. Each one of these toms, depending on the pitch, wanted to rattle the snares, and I kept adjusting these a little tighter or looser so that I wouldn't get the snare buzz. So the resonance from each drum, as I changed the pitch, bothered the snare drum. Sympathetic vibrations, we understand that. Sympathetic resonance, okay? So I believe this shows pretty clearly, again, that a sound of the drum is mostly, lion's share, biggest percentage of what a drum is doing is coming from the membranes, tightened up to a pitch, sitting on a cylinder. All right, the heads are making the sound. The shell, the density of the shell, the maple and the birch shells, they weigh almost identical. And this is a little bit lighter, being poplar. But the density of these three shells, not the individual veneer flitch, not the tree, these three shells, 10 ply, 1/4 inch, glued, compressed together to make a drum shell. There's hardly any density difference. So there's no change in how the shell will enhance or dehance frequencies and sound waves thrown off by the heads. It's just not difference. Now, if someone wants to say, well, if you get a Bubinga shell, well, wouldn't that depend on how thick it is? Just because you have a Bubinga shell, these are 1/4 inch. What if a Bubinga shell is 1/8 inch with some re-rings? Why would the density be any greater than 1/4 inch of these woods? See, weight and density are pretty close, right? So if that Bubinga shell at 1/4 inch had a significant difference in weight, but wait, there's more. When I did the last video, the last 2 videos with the 5 snare drums, all different materials and densities. And the only thing you could tell the difference was a dryness to the sound because the second drum had a black dot underneath. The third drum had a dot underneath and some muting rings on the outside. And the other 2 drums had nothing, and you couldn't tell the difference when I struck the first drum, a 3.5 by 14, and a 6.5 by 13 Padauk, the heaviest one of them all, a 5-pound difference. Why didn't they sound this different? They're different drums, different sizes, different dimensions. Because the sound of the drum is coming off the heads, people. The sound of the drum is coming off the heads. So I've got some editing to do here, and I'm gonna put this one on. You see what you think. The proof is in the playing. And somebody says, look, you need to take this. This has to be done in a laboratory. No. That's not the real world. We don't play according to waves and graphs coming off specialized equipment to measure all that stuff. You're going to be on a stage or in a studio with other musicians, all creating a sound stage, a sound field, with all the different frequencies, many of them competing with your drums. So anything that shows up on a graph or a wave in a laboratory, you're not going to hear that. It's a great marketing tool, but it's not real world drums. in real world music. It's just not. I'm trying to stay real world here. And the empirical evidence here to listen to what's going on and switching things up, because people always say, but, what but are you going to add now? But if you lower the tension of those heads, I did. If you raise the tension, I did. So it's density, depth of the shell, proper bearing edges so the heads can seat correctly. Those are the three issues that mean the most to what a drum will sound like as far as the shell. The sound of a drum's coming from the drum heads. That's just it, man. That's just it. You can't change that. And here it is. All right. Thanks for watching. Mystery set number 3 is coming up next. We'll see you then.